Brainlag, and you are here for author readings from Brainlag authors. As you can see, we have a wonderful selection of authors, both new and seasoned with Brainlag. So we'll just get right into it. I'm just going to start with a couple of housekeeping items. If you are coming here from Gen Con, please be sure to go into event details and click Turn in Ticket to Event Organizer. This is very important because it lets Gen Con know that people actually attended the panel, and it means it's more likely that Gen Con will give me more panels in future years, perhaps even when I'm going in person. So please remember to do that. Also, this meeting is being hosted on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Atiwandarok, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. For more information, visit native-land.ca. So, that said, let's start with introductions from our authors. JD, would you like to start?
Well, I'm JD DeLuzio, author of a number of things, but with Brainlag, I have The Con, a novel out, which came out last November, and I hope you read it. It is set at a science fiction convention, among other things, but it also has science fiction in it. And I have a collection of short stories, some previously published, some new, coming out also with Brainlag in March, called Live Nude Aliens and Other Stories. And you're going to hear a little from one of those stories, one of the new pieces, a little bit later.
Thank you. Hugh.
Well, I'm Hugh Spencer. I'm Hugh Spencer, speaking to you moistly from Toronto. And I'm a four-time author with Brainlag. My first novel was Extreme Dentistry, and I have two short story collections. The first is Why Hunt Flying Saucers. The second is The Progressive Apparatus. And the second novel, which just came out last week, is The Hard Side of the Moon. And I hope to be reading a bit of that to you tonight.
Thank you, Hugh. And Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Bryant. I'm the author of Rose, and I'm going to be reading from this. This is a horror comedy, and I'll tell you more about it when it's my turn. Thanks.
Thank you. Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon A.G. Spencer. I am the author of Soul, Light, and Wings, and also the upcoming book Shadows of Slavery, and I'll be reading from the latter today.
Thank you. Arlene.
Hi, I'm Arlene F. Marks. I'm the creator of the Sick Transit Terry universe, but for Brainlag, I have a novel coming out in November called Adventures in Godhood. And I have a short story collection that's going to be coming out from Brainlag in the spring. I'm going to be reading a bit from Adventures in Godhood this evening.
Thank you very much. Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I'm going to be reading tonight from my novel Blackout Odyssey, which just came out from Brainlag this August.
Thank you. And Stephen. Oh, yeah, I think you're muted. We can't hear you yet, Stephen.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
I'm Stephen B. Pearl. B makes it easy to find me on the internet. And I'm going to be reading from Cloning Freedom, the first book of the Freedom Saga that is through Brainlags. I also have the Tinker's World series through Brainlag and several other titles with various and sundry publishing houses.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, about the only one of you who I know has a deadline tonight would be Mike. But how about we go in the same order here? So, JD, would you like to start us off?
And do we still have 10 minutes?
Yes.
Or
10 minutes for reading.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to read this, and a bit of it's been truncated. This is from Flying Whistle Stop, a novella from the forthcoming Live Nude Aliens and Other Stories. The Whistlers arrived the day Jordan was born. The evening they returned, she was sitting on a concrete block at the arse end of Dundas, where a lot opened onto the alleyway. Behind them stood the rear entrance of a butcher's shop with painted ads like graffiti, things like box legs chicken, $1. She and Mary were drinking Coca-Cola with whiskey, despite the fact that Jordan didn't drink. Hated the taste, in fact, and Mary's church held strict views about such things. However, Jordan hadn't talked to Mary, not really, in weeks, and she wanted to be sociable. So, Coke with whiskey and minute amounts. Anyway, exams were over and done with, and she could breathe a little. Maybe she should be cutting loose a bit, though she immediately blamed the whiskey for that thought. The sun hadn't set yet, but it was starting to disappear behind the old gray stone building with the green wood doors. Mr. Russo sat in the backyard, slouching back in his trousers and undershirt, reading the evening edition by the evening light. Mary asked about Jordan's plans for the summer, besides more science and math. I'm looking for a job. Don't you got all those scholarships? I can always use money, and I have to build my resume. What about the flying whistle stop? She laughed. Remember how much we wanted to go? When they were middle schoolers, just seeing the movie of that first festival had been a liftoff. Nunzio Russo had impersonated James Brown the next week at recess, became as legendary in the schoolyard as their performance on screen. Nunzio had since quit school and taken an apprenticeship in the butcher shop. He might have painted those back alley ads. This year's tour, she knew, had the Spacefarers and Jimi Hendrix and Happy End, and then a lot of lesser lights. The lineup always played like a radio broadcast, so you might have Miles Davis, but then also the Cowsill family. The artists blowing fusion, docking pop and cool, sharing space with the Bubblegum Boys who played clean riffs with Mom and Little Sister Sue. The girls would have jumped at that 4 or 5 years ago. Mary would all but peed her pants if she'd heard there was going to be a local stop at the Landing Dome, because back then there was no way they were going to be busing to Toronto or Detroit or anywhere else to catch a concert, not on their parents' watch. The renewed enthusiasm reassured Jordan. Maybe Mary really had left the Unified Church. She was all about them for the last year or so and had thrown away all her old records. They would not want her going to the stop, and definitely not at the Dome. Good on Mary, Jordan thought. Those Unifieds wouldn't approve of Jordan either. Or of either drinking underage like they were a pair of runaway wannabe heppies, which their end of Dundas was seeing more of now that summer had come. Ruefully, Jordan had to agree with them on that. She felt just slightly unsteady and made a note to have no more whiskey, possibly ever. About then, a smallish blonde girl came riding by on a purple bicycle, an old-fashioned looking one with a slanted crossbar arranged for skirts, even though nobody biked in a skirt anymore. Hey, baby bird, Jordan called. The girl looked skeptical but slowed down. Jordan's smile conveyed friendliness, and baby bird finally turned and came around to where the older girl sat. Hey, aren't you Barry Bird's kid sister? My name's Jackie. Jackie Bird, like the first President Kennedy's wife crossed with Johnson's first lady. She shrugged. My mom liked the name Jackie. That's a good name to have. So I know you. Your brother's a friend of Ray Newsom. What's it to you? Mary snorted into her drink when she heard that. Jordan's got a thing for your brother's friend. Jordan Vauxhall? You Jordan Vauxhall? Yeah. Hey, you're on Central Girls Volley basketball team. We both were. Graduated now. Yeah, Ray talks about you sometimes. What's he say? Mary asked the question. Ain't you one of those academy kids? Yeah, Ray says you're going to go off to work in space. Maybe. Oh, I'm surprised. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Oh, why is that surprising? Jackie Bird shrugged. I don't see why an academy girl would be interested in one of my jackass brother's friends. Jordan laughed a little too loudly. I mean, no offense. Ray's kind of cute. Mary snorted again. Baby blonde bird here is already checking out our man. Hey, be nice. She's Jackie Bird. She paused a minute. What about Little Bird? Barry's buddies call me that all the time. Better than Baby Bird. You know what those Labots are up to tonight? Ray and your brother? What, I'm Barry's secretary now? Jordan smiled and Jackie smiled back. Band was practicing this afternoon, but who knows now? Probably at Dino's or the arcade, trying to score weed maybe. A look crossed her face. Hey, do you have booze in that Coke? Just then, Mrs. Rousseau burst through the back door, yelling something about a ship. Jesu Maria, it's the Whistlers, she said. It has to be Whistlers. The pop bottle Mary had been holding crashed against the blacktop. Jordan's mother went into labor the day the saucers landed. Strictly speaking, they weren't saucers. They were scalloped crescents. But people had been seeing the things since Kenneth Arnold first reported them in 1947. Arnold said they moved like saucers skipping on water. The media dubbed them flying saucers, and it was lenticular space discs that landed on the drive-in movie screens. So, a year after Life made the case for interplanetary saucers, the headlines of even many august newspapers declared the saucers had landed. The boomerangs have landed. It does not have the same ring. The New York Times opted for flying vehicles of unknown origin. The Chinese phrase translated something like mystery ships, which carried a definite poetic quality. Jordan's mother, Irene, had no idea about the ships. The Vauxhalls had bought a TV in '52, but it wasn't on when Aunt Martha, who was staying during the late term, called a cab and tried sending a message to Irene's husband, Joe. Bit of a skip, we're dealing with the birth and the landings, and then we skip to people had anticipated little green men with pointy ears and antennae. Others postulated ethereal humanoids bathed in light. The whistlers of the first place failed to check any of those boxes. At site after site, creatures with 7 limbs emerged. They were tall, towering well over 2 meters. Skip a bit. What we could see of their skin beneath their suits ranged in color from dull mauve to bright purple. The suits also ranged in color. Aesthetics on the first place apparently trended towards garish. The whistlers had 2 larger eyes and a cluster of smaller ones on what we might call a forehead. Where the head joined the body, issued a series of whistles and mews and song, which were then broadcast in translation through some unseen speakers in the ships themselves, but which carried the sound at roughly the same volume to everyone within several blocks of any given landing and on nearby radios. The translator voices ran a bewildering range, from local accents and drawls to those that recalled radio reporters and government bureaucrats. People in Central Park heard an accent that was half Bronx and half Brooklyn. Captured in full-on news camera, it became the default broadcast in North America. Multi-limbed giants flickering in grayscale as music trilled from a whistler and a translated voice boomed forth, tone and intonation suggesting a hot dog vendor at Dodger Stadium. On behalf of the amalgamated clouders of the first place, we greet you and your planetary citizens. I am the first violinist of the 28th subclouder of the Greater Visiting Boat. You may call me, a theme of 9 notes follows. It does not translate. We will raise a primary and tertiary pause in greeting you and request with ground exploration and system exploration. Please give new Premier League hours to ferry them. The situation portends no danger, and you will not be harmed through intention and strive for beneficence and learning of this encounter. May your clouder rest soundly during the hours of darkness. Variations repeated across the globe. Save for the ship that landed in Gansu and another that set down in Antarctica and had only penguins to address, each gave roughly the same introduction, though with differing tunes as personal names, and a diversity of titles that translated with reference to the local culture's musical instruments, like Third Flautist 4-note theme, or Second Guzheng 5-note theme, leaving humanity with the impression we were about to be colonized by a space orchestra. The significance of the titles remained impenetrable. What we knew is this: on March 15, 1953, human history changed forever. 3 months later, the whistlers were gone, leaving behind film and audio and memories, photos at concerts and state dinners and weddings and Little Leagues games, fleeting glimpses into areas of science we'd not yet imagined, a new appreciation for base 12 mathematics, and clay-like instruments with multiple holes and tubes that could not be easily played, but which nevertheless found its way into human culture, from orchestras to space jazz, and later the Beatles, who would use the whistler's flute after Beatle George started taking lessons. That the instrument could be used to more or less duplicate the sounds made by the visitors, we gleaned immediately. Mastering the skill eluded all but gifted musicians, and even they struggled with the role that pitch and tone played in the alien language, all whistles and trills and mews and rasps. No one learned more than a few phrases of the visitor's speech before they departed. Bit of translation, and then certain phrases remained enigmatic, so that an otherwise straightforward observation on state-of-the-art Terran rocket physics might end with a whistler narrowing eyes and saying, "Through this filter, midnight burns with reverent verdancy," and offering no further explanation. The beat poets loved it. 18 years later, Jordan, Mary, and Jackie joined the Rousseaus around a portable TV on their back porch and watched the report. Echoes sounded from open windows as scalloped crescents once more dropped to Earth. And I'm going to stop there.
Great. Thank you very much, JD.
Thank you.
Sorry, just changing the layout here. There we go. All right. So that was from Flying Whistle Stop, and one of the stories in the upcoming Live Nude Aliens and Other Stories, which will be released next March. All right. So let's go on to Hugh. How about you give us your reading?
Okay. Pardon me. This is from the hard side of the moon. It's, by the way, I just have to say, this is a beautiful book. It's, I think, Brainlag's first hardcover. And I feel like a real author now because I've been in a hardcover book. So it's pretty exciting. I'm going to dive into the second half of the book, which starts on the moon. Well, he's been on the moon for a while. Our character, who is a young man who ends up on a secret moon factory in the late 70s. He's the works on the assembly lines building something called boxes, which are used in some sort of potential interstellar project by an organization called Progressive Apparatus, who not the best run organization in the world. It's sort of it has many ins and outs. So this chapter is called Dr. Bauman. Oh yes, I should mention that also in his role, he's been voluntold. He's the volunteer health and safety officer for the assembly lines, which are of course terribly unsafe. And he has been taken aside for some special training from Dr. Bauman. 8:43. You and Dr. Bauman will be spending a lot of time together for the next while. The middle management drone, who once must have fancied himself to be some kind of silver fox, led me into the training center meeting room where the doctor was waiting for me. Bauman sat at the table. Hair so short it was almost impossible to tell what color it was. Dirty blonde, I think. Ramrod straight back and heavy black rimmed glasses. She was wearing a dark gray zippered coverall, and I had no idea of what division of the Progressive Apparatus /SS she was from. The ex-fox grinned at me. Dr. Bauman is a physician. Oh, she was a medical type doctor. No wonder she didn't look familiar as a designated HFC. I wondered that I noticed that we didn't have too many of those up here at the plant. She is going to walk you through some new health and safety and intervention procedures. And exit ex-fox. Dr. Bauman pressed a switch that was set under the table, and a light at the far end of the room revealed a half-dozen crash test dummies, all dressed in denim union suits, sitting on some folding chairs. The dummies reminded me of my old Capicoids, which was an art project he did when he was back on Earth, and a reference to Carl Capek's play R.U.R. As a volunteer health and safety officer, you are often the first on the scene of unplanned industrial events. I just nodded, not really sure where all this was going. Your ability to deploy what I am about to show you could save the company significant amounts of time, materials, and money. Dr. Bauman stood up and walked over to a wheeled metal cabinet. I am going to simulate a number of scenarios. Sure. Dr. Bauman was going to show me how to save time, materials, and money. Not lives. This doctor was definitely working for PA. She slid open a drawer at the top of the cabinet and removed a ball-peen hammer. Then she took a moment to get a good grip on the handle and swung the hammer under the head of the nearest dummy. Gah! That was me making a completely involuntary noise. Dr. Bauman was not an excessively large person, nor was she obviously very muscular. However, she must have been plenty strong because she made quite a dent in that dummy. Maybe she was thinking about somebody that she didn't like very much when she brought that hammer down. She looked over at me. Could you please come over here? Number 802-701. I really didn't want to comply with that request, most likely because she was still holding the hammer. Please. The way she said please didn't mean please. It meant obey. I obeyed. Notice the impact area on the cranium. About 1/3 of the dummy's head was a cracked crater. Are you looking carefully? Yes. I didn't add my thoughts about horrified fascination. Can you please tell me what kind of equipment or process failures on the lines might cause an injury like that? My first impulse was to suggest a psychotic doctor wielding a metal hammer. That event seemed pretty unlikely outside this room. I try hard to think about this objectively, logically. Think like a Vulcan bishop. That was his last name. It would have to be something at least the size of a fist, traveling at high speed. Dr. Bauman nodded as I spoke. So it would likely be a compression breach or a container breakdown. Where is that likely to happen? Okay, detective time. This is getting more like Columbo than Star Trek. Up around the final assembly area is where you'd find the hard couplings that would be about the right size and weight to be a suitable projectile. Dr. Bauman smiled and put the hammer back in the cabinet. I smiled too, because I suddenly felt in less danger. So you will know that you can only expect this kind of head injury at specific phases in the production process. That made sense, but it seemed like a pretty pointless observation to me. If some intern had that sort of head injury, there was SFA, brackets, sweet fuck all, on brackets, that Mr. Health and Safety here could do to help. Dr. Bauman took the damaged head in both hands and twisted it off the body. That prior awareness may save you a few seconds, because where the region around the injury where the injury occurred will be of no use to us. The other hemisphere of the brain, if you can isolate the cranial bleeding and not bruise the tissue too badly during the removal process, can still provide some useful neural matter. Useful neural matter? You mean like brains? The doctor responded with a condescending smile and took a felt pen from a zippered pocket and started drawing dotted lines on the broken head. These are the points where you want to make the incisions. After a few more observations, Dr. Bauman put down the damaged object and used a range of hammers to smash more dummy heads from a variety of angles. While she did this, she explained how each injury type presented a different harvesting opportunities. Apparently, it was particularly important to try and keep as much of the frontal lobes and hypothalamus as intact as possible. Some cortical structures offer more potential computing power than others. Right, makes total sense. Waste not, want not. Eventually, Dr. Bauman took out a machete and approached the next to last dummies. We don't simulate blood because that gets too messy, so messy that you can't see the separation points caused by the occurrences. We certainly didn't want any mess if we could possibly avoid it. Now, if we get a driver detachment at the same time as a pressure surge, fuck. My nightmare scenario with Angie along the lines. Angie is his girlfriend, sometime girlfriend. Dr. Bauman held the machete with both hands and swung the blade through the dummy's neck. Could have been made of butter. You would think that a neat decapitation would be an ideal injury for a full brain harvest. An ideal injury? The dummy's head bounced off the floor. However, there is still the potential for force trauma, and the tissue around the brainstem can bleed out and dehydrate surprisingly quickly. The head rolled to the far end of the room and came to a stop. And speaking of coming to a stop.
Thank you very much, Hugh. And again, that's from The Hard Side of the Moon, which just came out last week. And tomorrow night, we are having the official launch party for the book. So be sure to come back. That's tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Twitch. Same bat time, same bat channel.
More exciting words.